If your compliance program lives in SharePoint, it's already failing. Most organizations don't actually have a compliance problem, they have a leadership problem. Compliance fails because it's treated as paperwork instead of strategy. It gets buried in tools, documents, and task trackers instead of owned at the executive level. When that happens, compliance becomes theater, something performed for auditors instead of something that protects the business. Here's the uncomfortable reality. If compliance is not discussed alongside revenue, delivery, and risk, it's already disconnected from how decisions are made. And disconnected compliance always breaks under pressure. This conversation is not about controls, it's about ownership. If your compliance leader can't say no to the business, they're not in a leadership position. When people hear compliance ownership, they often think of documentation, policies, and frameworks. That's a mistake. Ownership is not about writing policies. Ownership is about deciding why compliance exists in your organization, which risks actually matter, and which trade-offs the business is willing to accept. If no one can clearly articulate why a control exists, it will eventually be ignored. If no one owns the risk posture, compliance evolves into a box-checking exercise designed to survive the next audit rather than protect the organization. Policies are not strategy. They are evidence that decisions were deferred instead of made. Compliance is always delegated down and blamed up. Here's the most common failure pattern. Leadership delegates compliance to a team and tells them to make us compliant. Responsibility flows downward, but accountability flows upwards. Executives disengage until something goes wrong. An audit failure, a stalled deal, or a regulatory inquiry. At that point, compliance suddenly becomes urgent, but urgency without strategy produces chaos, not capability. Scrambling before assessments is not bad luck. It's a predictable outcome of executive disengagement. Reactive compliance is not a compliance failure, it's a leadership choice. So if your chief compliance officer can't stop bad decisions, they're just an administrator. Most organizations confuse management with governance. Management is about execution, tracking controls, updating policies, coordinating audits. Governance is about authority. Who can escalate the risk? Who can reject unsafe shortcuts? Who can force uncomfortable conversations? A compliance leader without decision authority is structurally set up to fail. Visibility without veto power is meaningless. Compliance that cannot introduce friction cannot protect the organization. If your compliance function can only document risk after the fact, it is not governing. It's just taking notes. Boards don't care about frameworks. They care about exposure. Boards are not interested in technical compliance artifacts. They care more about material risk and accountability. They want to know what could harm the organization, which risks are being accepted consciously, and who owns those decisions. Dashboards that do not influence decision-making are noise, not governance. If risk acceptance is not explicit, it is accidental, and accidental risk is what boards fear most. Compliance strategy exists to translate regulatory and operational risk into language leadership can act on. When it fails to do that, trust erodes quickly. If your compliance program collapses under audit pressure, it was never real in the first place. So here's the hard truth many organizations avoid. If your compliance program only works when everything goes perfectly, it's not a program, it's a task list. If audits create panic, governance never existed. If compliance feels heavy and slow, strategy was never defined. Documentation is what organizations produce when they avoid making decisions. Busy does not mean effective. Activity does not equal ownership. Compliance is not about doing more. It's about deciding better. If everyone owns compliance, no one does. Every organization should be able to answer one question clearly. Who owns compliance strategy? Not who manages tasks. Not who updates policies. Who owns the risk posture, the trade-offs, and the outcomes? If that is unclear, the organization has already accepted unmanaged risk, whether it admits it or not. Compliance does not fail quietly. It fails publicly. And that's why compliance strategy and governance ownership sit at the top of the list.